Hi and hello, welcome to online biology class because of Ideal&Adharsh Educational Institution and the year. I am Sadish Kumar going to take down the class regarding the topic of origin and evolution of life. This is a unit number 19 for 10th standard biological science. So today's topic we are seeing about variation. So first one we have to see in what is variation. So the concept of variation which is proposed by Charles Darwin for his findings. Then he was conducted with various kinds of experiment. Based on this experiment he was give some kind of basic idea regarding the variation. So the variations are two type. One is called an somatic variation and another one is called germinal variation. So somatic variation is nothing but the somatic variation means the variation which takes place on the body cell or somatic cell, which is called an somatic variation. And second one is called an germinal variation. So germinal variation which takes place on the egg cell or sperm, which is called an germinal variation. So based on his observation, he says that the variations are further classified into two types. One is called an continuous variation and another one is called discontinuous variation. So the continuous variation, which means they have some kind of the variation which takes place on throughout the generation, is called continuous variation. Discontinuous variation means which is not passed on with the next generation and it will be stopped on one particular generation, which takes place on very few of the people, is called discontinuous variation. Right. So now let us see some kind of basic idea regarding the variation. So this is the diagram. I will give you various types of cell. Then each and every type of the cell, they are having a different color and different shape, because this is all they are commonly called upon cell. But they have some kind of morphological variation. According to that, we are seeing different kinds of butterflies. They are in the various colors. They also having a variation. We will see the human beings from our family members or the classmates. For example, we are seen in the 40 members in our class. All they are not in the same. All they are not in the equal height. All they are not in the equal weight. All they are not having an equal quantity of ideas and knowledge, because each and every one they are having some kind of minute variation. The small variation which is gives some kind of evolution. So each and every one they are differ from some kind of morphological character, anatomical character and knowledge. So all these things are comes under the category of variation. So the concept of variation which takes place on only in the sexual reproduction. We know very well the reproductions are three types. One is called vegetative reproduction, asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction. From the vegetative reproduction and sexual reproduction, there is no much more changes. The parent organism as well as the offspring are same. But the sexual reproduction only, they will give some kind of morphological and anatomical variation. Because of the reason, the involvement of two different types of gametes, then 50% of character which is passed on from your father's side and 50% of character which is passed on from your mother's side. Then fusion of two gametes which have some kind of dominant and recessive character. Based on his mental observation and Darwin's observation, the variations are classified and different types. Let us enter into the textual content regarding the variation. So the continuation of this variation, today's topic we will see about paleobotany. So the paleobotany is nothing but studying of fossil oriented plants in the form of plant and plant oriented sedimentation. Then continuation of this paleobotany, we will see about fossilization. So fossilization, the sedimentation of rock or any type of organism, it will be takes millions of years ago and they are form of some kind of evidence, the such kind of organism which is available on the world. So these are the things are seen about today's topic. Come on friends, let's we enter into the textual content. Then sexual reproduction, which involves the meiosis, help to recombination of genes during the gamete fusion. So three types of cell division: A mitosis and meiosis. So the meiosis cell division which takes place on the gonads during the time of gamete fusion. So gamete fusion means fusion of male and female gamete. This leads to the difference in the phenotype of the offspring from the parents. So leads to the change in the phenotype, which means phenotype means morphological character. We are not exact carbon copy of our father or mother. We are having a minute difference because of the reason the combination of two different types of genes. These differences are called variation. So the phenotypic differences, which is called an variation. Then the variation is the differences found among the individual of the same species and offspring of the same parent. So same species, that means within the human being. I already told you, from our father, our mother, our sister, our brother, our grandfather, grandma, uncles, daughters, whatever it is, we are not in the same. We are not exactly same. They are having some kind of difference, but we are all human beings. The same species of the offspring of the parent. Then our our parents and ourselves, we are not also same, because of the reason we are having some kind of relationship with our parents, but we are not ditto the carbon copy of our parents. The variation is the raw material which play the important role of evolution. So the evolution, the variation which gives some kind of a basic step or raw material or source of evolution. Our father, they have some kind of recessive character and a dominant character. They have some kind of disease resistant power. To compare to our father and mother, we are having little bit of more knowledge and little bit of disease resistant, height variation, color variation. That is called an evolution. Evolution would not be possible without variation. Without variation, we cannot be find out any kind of evolution. Then there is no variation means we are also since to date we are look like a chimpanzee. We are not in the form of human being. So the human being which is originated from the monkeys due to the several values evolution which is takes place onto the human being. And this is the diagrammatic representation. We will see the different types of cells and the different types of butterflies. Then all they are comes under the same species, but having a different colors and different shapes. So this is the best example of Mendel's observation and Darwin's observation for the variation. And the types of variation, the somatic variation and germinal variation. Two more question. These are the variation affected by the body or somatic cell is called a somatic variation. They do not heritable. The somatic variation, for example, from my hand I have a small mole, or from my hand I have small injury, which is not passed on with the next generation, which is takes place on the body cell. So my son or my daughter, they does not having any kind of mole or the particular kind of mark from the hand. They are occur due to the environmental factor, the somatic variation which is takes place on the environmental factor, which is not controlled by any type of gamete cell. And the germinal variation, these variations are produced in the germ cells of an organism. So which means in the form of sex cells. Sex cells are the sperm cell and egg cell, which are inherited, which means they have some kind of variation. For example, they are having some kind of variation during the time of reproduction, which is inherited from the next generation. So that is called an inherited. They may be present in the ancestor or maybe in the form only occurs in suddenly, which is takes place on the ancestor, which means our grandpa or grandma, or it may be in the form of suddenly occurs. It may be takes place on any direction or due to any sudden mutation which is takes place on a particular kind of the organism. And this is the diagrammatic representation, the germline mutation and the somatic mutation. The germline mutation which is takes place on the sex cells in the form of sperm cell and egg cell, and the somatic variation which is takes place on the body cell, the patches of this area, which is give this idea that there is no gamete is carried with the next generation. By the same time, we will see in the germline mutation which is the takes place on the next generation. Because of the reason, the 50% of contribution which is takes place on the father side and 50% of the contribution which is takes place on the mother side. And next we can see about the classifications of variation based on these things. And this Darwin's observation, he was classifying this variation into two types. One is called an continuous variation and second one is called an discontinuous variation. So depending upon this statement itself, we are getting a meaning. The continuous means which is takes place on the throughout the life and throughout the generation, and discontinuous variation which means which is takes place on one particular type of time or one particular time of period is called an discontinuous variation. And the continuous variation, these are the small variation which is occurred among the individuals of the population. It's a small variation. We will see the height, color, eye color, ear shape, then all other things is called of a small variation. They are called and then fluctuating variation, which means which is takes place on the continuous generation of the population, and they are occur the gradual accumulation of the population. We will see the large population of the human being. We will see in India we are having a 120 crores of people, but all they are not in the same color, all they are not in the same height, all they are not in the same weight. So from we will see from Kerala, we can easily identify they are belongs to Kerala. Then we are easily identified the people, they are those who are comes out from the North India. Then we are easily identified the people from the China, the people from the Japan, because of the morphological character. This is called an continuous variation. The skin color, height and weight of the individual, color of eye, etc., they are comes under the category of continuous variation. And discontinuous variation, this is the sudden changes which is occur on the organism due to the mutation. They do not have the intermediate forms. This is the example, the short-legged sheep and the human being, they are having an additional finger or sixth finger in our hand. It is an example of discontinuous variation, which is not passed on with the next generation, which is takes place suddenly by means of the mutation. So these large variation are not useful for the evolution. The short-legged ancient sheep and the six or more digit of finger in the human, etc. Discontinuous mutation variation from the basis of mutation theory, which is proposed by Dewey. One more question. Then the more to know the relationship between the mutation and variation, two more question. Mutation and variations are two events involved in the process of variation and evolution. Mutation arise the error occurring the DNA during the replication or exposing of UV rays or the chemicals. We know very well. Then according to the time of DNA evolution, we will see that what is mutation. And mutation leads to variation. It is bring about the changes. The mutation leads to the variation, so it is bring about the changes in the single individual, which is not created by the population, which is takes place on this single individual. Then paleobotany. So the paleobotany is derived from the Greek words the paleons, that means old, and botany means studying of plants. We know very well. So it is a branch of paleontology then that deals with the recovery and identification of plants remaining the geological past. So which is the evidence the what are the plants which is available on the post period or millions of years ago or hundreds of years ago. Still now various types of global warming and environmental changes which is takes place, sudden types of plant and particular type of valuable plants, they are eliminated from the world. So all these things we are studied by means of the paleobotany. Define paleobotany is a 2 mark question. Then a plant fossil is any preserved part of the plant that is died long back, which is not takes place or 1 or 2 years. It will be takes place millions of years or billions of years. The fossils may be in these prehistoric impressions that is hundreds of millions of years old. It is the fossils are 100 millions of years old, very long periods of time. And the majority of the plant fossils are disarticulated. The parts of the plants in the rare find the plants are preserved as a whole. So this is the diagrammatic representation the for plant fossil. Then we are getting into the only the parts. We cannot be get down with the full part of the plant. And next one, the importance of fossil, 2 mark question. They through light this phylogeny and evolution of plant. We are identified about the evolution of plants. The fossil plant give the historical approaches of plant kingdom. So what are the types of plant which is given or available from the long back of time? They are giving some kind of historical approach of the plant kingdom. The fossils are useful in the classification of plants. We are classifying the plants, whether it is algae, fungi, bryophyte, tetraphyte, gymnosperm or angiosperm, whether it is flowering or non-flowering, it is a land plant or terrestrial plant or aquatic plant. They can classifying this plant type. The fossil plant can be used for filled out the describe the comparative anatomy. We can find out some kind of basic plant anatomy, internal structure of the plants. These things are studied about the importance of fossil. Then we can know about the interesting person, the father of plant paleobotany. Then Caspar Maria van Starbung, he is the father of paleobotany from the year of 1761 to 1838. Was born on Europe. One more question. He was established a Bergman National Museum and Brugge in and deemed for the founder of modern paleobotany. One more question, who is the father of paleobotany? And second one, the Birbal Sahani is the father of Indian paleobotany. In the year of 1891 to 1849, he is presented his research in the two different parts of the paleobotany. One is called the anatomy and morphology of paleogenic phones. We know very well the phones. Then fossil. Then second one, the fossil plants of the Indian and Gondwana formation. So these are the things which is done by the Birbal Sahni. Is a father of Indian paleobotany. Two scientist name is very important. They may be asked from the common examination. And this is the diagrammatic representation of the two legend which is belongs to the paleobotany. And second one, then we will see about the detailed question, book back question. Then what is how fossilization takes place, what are the steps involved for fossilization. The process of formation of fossil is the rock is called a fossilization. So the rock, the fossil they are converted into in the form of stone is called fossilization. The common method of fossilization include petrification, mold and cast, carbonization, preservation, compression and infiltration. These are the process which takes place on fossilization process. Number one is called petrification. The minerals like silica is slowly is presented and replace this original organic tissue in the form of rock like a fossil. This method of fossilization can be preserved hard and soft parts. We can preserve with the hard and soft parts. The bone and wood fossils are petrified. So all the diagram you will see in the last portion of this video. And second one, the mold and cast, the replica of the plant and animal is preserved as sedimentary rocks in the form of mold and cast. When the organism get buried and sedimented or dissolved underground water, then leaving a hollow depression is called mold. And it shows the original shape but does not have the several internal structure, only the hollow they having in the bowl like structure. The minerals are sedimented, fill up the hollow depression and forms a cast. Preservation, the original remains is preserved in the form of ice or amber tree sap. They protect this organism from the decay. They are preventing the organism decaying. The entire plant or animals are preserved. We can preserve by means of the preservation. The entire plant and animals are preserved. And the compression, when the organism dies, the hard part of their body settled at the bottom of the seabed and covered and sedimented. This process is sedimented goes on continuously and fossils are formed. And last one, the infiltration or replacement. From that itself we are getting a point. The precipitation of the mineral takes place, which is later is infiltrated and the cell wall. The process is brought about by the several mineral element like silica, calcium carbonate and magnesium carbonate. So the hard part is dissolved and replaced by these minerals. So we will see this diagrammatic representation how the fossilization takes place. The organism dinosaur is living and it was died. Then particular area was covered with water and it will be takes millions of years. The tree and plants are growing and the person those who are belongs to the research they are find out the evidence of fossilization. First one we are seeing about petrification, the bone which is converted into in the stone. Second one, mold and cast, they are having a exact structure. Then preservation or ice amper, the organism which is preserved in the stone format. And the compression, the plant part is compressed, infiltration, formation of silica and magnesium into in the form of shell. And the one more diagram is given there, that is called the living fossil. The plant is called ginkgo biloba. It's a plant which is called a living fossil. And the next one, two more question, living fossil. These are the living organism that is similar in the appearance of fossilized distinct ancestor, usually no extinct close future. The example is called ginkgo biloba. And determination of age of the fossil, two more question and maybe asked from the four more question. The age of the fossils are determined by radioactive element present in one more question. They may be in the form of carbon, uranium, lead or potassium. It is usually in the paleobotany and anthropology determining the age of the human fossil and manuscript. By means of all these things we are find out in the age of the fossil. So what is radiocarbon method or dating method, which is discovered by Libby in the year of 1956 using with carbon 14 and nitrogen 14, we can convert it into in the form of find out the age of the fossil is called an radiocarbon method, radioactive carbon method or dating method. The carbon consumption of the animal and plant sap of death, since they only decaying the process of C14 occurs continuously, then each and every type of organism they are consist of carbon, then the time passed since the death of the plant or animal can be calculated by measuring the amount of C14 presence of carbon and nitrogen present on their body. And more to know question, what is geological time scale? We know very well it's a geological time scale. So geological time scale is a system of chronological dating of related geological rocks terra in the time and used the geologist, paleontologist and others, the earth scientist, then describing a timing and their relationship of the event that having occurring during the earth history. So this is the diagrammatic representation of geological time scale. They are find out the formation of earth and find out the formation of organism, which is scientist by geologist, paleontologist and earth scientist. And the last one, do you know and more to know question, Tiruvakarai Fossil Wood Park from the Viluppuram district, the Tamil Nadu, the 2 million years ago, the tree trunks that got buried along the river, and in course the time the organic matter was replaced by the silica and was fossilized. So this is the national fossil wood park from the Tiruvakarai from the Tamil Nadu in Viluppuram district. Then Viluppuram district. So they are retained their color, shape, and texture, and was covered into the soil rocks. The annular rings and texture, color layers, notes, and every properties of the plant is still visible. What are the things we are seen in the plant from lively? All these things are exposed by the fossil is called wood rock. Then thank you very much. So if you are like this video, please subscribe this channel. I'm Sadish Kumar from Biological Science Department. Thank you very much.